In this video lecture, I'll discuss nouns and pronouns. Let's start with the specifics of nouns. A noun is a part of speech that represents a person, place, thing, event, or idea. This lesson will help you become familiar with a variety of nouns. There are many types, so recognizing them can sometimes be tricky, but it's helpful to know the purpose for knowing about the different types of nouns. And what is that purpose? Well, being comfortable with their differences will give you the ability to use nouns more effectively as a writer and as a communicator as well. So let's start with common and proper nouns. Common nouns name non-specific people, places, things, events, or ideas. Because they're general, they don't start with a capital letter unless they begin a sentence. Here are a few common noun examples. Proper nouns name specific people, places, things, events, or ideas and are always capitalized. Here are a few examples of those. Now let's move on to singular and plural nouns. Singular nouns refer to one person, place, thing, event, or idea, thus singular or single. Here are a few singular noun examples. Plural nouns refer, of course, to multiple places, people, things, events, ideas. Here are a few examples of those. Some nouns, like the noun moose, can be either singular or plural based upon its meaning in the sentence. Let's move on to count and no count nouns. Just as the name indicates, count nouns are nouns that can be counted. Some examples include the following: pencil, tree, car, student, computer. Non-count nouns are, you guessed it, nouns that can't be counted. Here are some examples of those: gravity, milk, soccer, honesty, sand. Now, this is important to be aware of because number adjectives, one, two, three, etc., can't be used with non-count nouns, the ones you see on the bottom here. You can't use the number adjectives like 3 or 10 with non-count nouns like milk or sand. You can count glasses of milk or grains of sand, but you can't count the milk or sand itself. Let's talk about compound nouns. Some nouns are made up of more than one word, and these nouns are known as compound nouns. Some compound nouns are joined together with a dash or a hyphen, I should say. Some are joined together into one word. A hyphen, by the way, is a short line that links two words or word parts. Here are examples of compound nouns with and without hyphens. Sometimes compound nouns become so common that they're gradually and over time shortened to one word. One recent example is the word blog, which was originally the compound noun web log. Let's discuss the functions now of nouns. Nouns can be used in three basic ways: as subjects, objects, or adjectives. A subject is simply a who or what the sentence is about. Here are examples of nouns used in the subject position. My delicious meal was not cheap. Steve and Penny are working together. Steve and Penny. Nouns can also be used as, as objects: direct objects, indirect objects, and objects of prepositions. A direct object receives the action of the verb, as is seen in this sentence: I locked the door behind me. An indirect object receives the direct object, as is seen in this sentence: Jane showed Tim the location of the star. An object of a preposition completes the meaning of what we call a prepositional phrase. as is seen right here in this sentence. The gifts were placed in the trunk. Nouns can act like adjectives, describing other nouns or pronouns. Here are two examples. The fight octagon was covered with blood, and the art gallery just recently opened. In this first one, the noun fight describes the noun octagon. And in our second one, the noun art describes the noun gallery. So they're acting here as adjectives or describers of other nouns. In some of these cases, nouns act like possessive adjectives, showing ownership or possession over other nouns. We see then this in this example. Anna stole Matt's hat right from the top of his head, where Matt is the possessor of the hat. Let's move on to pronouns. A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun in a sentence. Just like nouns, pronouns can represent people, places, things, events, ideas. Using them helps you avoid repeating the same word over and over again in the same piece of writing. Let me read this example first as it is. According to the article, Stephen King once wrote for the common person, but his hatred of the right has infected what he frequently refers to as the craft. And now, without the pronouns. According to the article, Stephen King once wrote for the common person, but hatred of the right has infected what frequently refers to as the craft. As you can see and hear, adding pronouns makes this sentence easier on both the eye and the ear. Now, if I read it once again, this time not replacing Stephen King as a common noun with pronouns, but rather replacing the pronouns with Stephen King, the common noun. This is what it would sound like. According to the article, Stephen King once wrote for the common person, but Stephen King's hatred of the right has infected what Stephen King frequently refers to as the craft. Yeah, that's not so easy on the ear. Let's discuss 4 topics regarding pronouns. First, personal pronouns, indefinite pronouns, relative pronouns, and pronouns in sentences. We'll start with this one. Personal pronouns are the most common type of pronoun. They're called personal pronouns because they rename specific people and animals and objects or places. Personal pronouns change form, and that depends upon how they're used in the sentence. Now, to know which form to use, you have to consider the 4 ways that pronouns can be categorized: number, person, gender, or case. When pronouns are divided by number, they're separated into 2 groups, singular and plural, as you can see here in this table. When they're categorized by person, pronouns take the first, second, or third person position, as is seen in this table. The third way to categorize is by gender, male, female, or neutral, as is seen in this table. And finally, pronouns can be categorized by case, as you can see here in this table. Subjective case pronouns are used as the subject of a sentence, and objective case are used as objects of prepositions or direct objects or indirect objects. Possessive case pronouns are used as always as possessive adjectives. Let's move on to indefinite pronouns. One definition of indefinite is not precise. In other words, indefinite pronouns don't name a specific noun, which means that they're a bit less precise than personal pronouns, indefinite. Like personal pronouns, indefinite pronouns have number. They can be singular, plural, or both, depending on their usage. The pronouns all, any, most, none, and some can be singular or plural. And if you're going to determine how one of these words is being used, identify what the pronoun is referencing. In this first example, most of the apartments are carpeted. Most is plural because it renames the plural noun apartments. In the second example, most of the floor is carpeted. It renames the singular noun floor. Let's move on to relative pronouns. A relative pronoun introduces a dependent clause, which is a word group that contains a subject and a verb only, but not a predicate. So dependent clauses do not express a complete thought. Let's look at the following sentence and discuss the relative pronoun used. During our stay in Japan, we visited two temples that were over 1,000 years old. Okay, the relative pronoun here is the word that. This relative pronoun introduces the dependent clause that were over 1,000 years old. Relative pronouns are joined to at least one other independent clause, which is a group of words that does express a complete thought. The independent clause in our example is we visited two temples. Think of a relative pronoun as a word that connects a complete thought to an incomplete thought that tells more. And by the way, the relative pronoun always has what we call an antecedent, which is a word or group of words that come before it or before the relative pronoun itself. So the relative pronoun in our example is that. Remember? What is its antecedent, or what comes right before it? What is the word or group of words that is modified or given more detail by the dependent clause that were over 1,000 years old? That's right. The antecedent is temples. There are 7 relative pronouns: that, which, whichever, who, whoever, whom, and whomever. Some relative clauses are essential or necessary to the meaning of a sentence, while others are non essential or not essential to the meaning of the sentence. The pronoun that always introduces essential or needed information, relative clauses, essential relative clauses, sometimes they're called restrictive clauses, is that. So when you see that pronoun, that, you know that what comes after it or what follows it is necessary in order to understand the sentence. The clause that were designed by Donald Glover in this sentence here. The sneakers that were designed by Donald Glover are expected to sell out quickly. If if that was removed, you wouldn't know which sneakers are expected to sell out. In other words, if the sentence said the sneakers are expected to sell out quickly, we're not giving it any more information, and we need that information, right? Because it's specifying which sneakers. That means that's a restrictive clause, right? We need that one. The pronoun which always introduces the opposite or non essential or not necessary clauses. The clause which, 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 photographers call golden hour is non essential. Let me read that whole thing to you. The period just before sunset, which photographers call golden hour, is my favorite time of day. If which photographers call golden hour was removed from the sentence, you would still know the speaker's favorite time of day, right? So that clause, which photographers call golden hour, is called a non essential clause. Okay. Who and whom are the only relative pronouns that have a specific case. Who is a subjective case pronoun, and whom is called an objective case pronoun. If you're not sure which word is correct, who or whom, determine how the pronoun is being used. In this sentence, Justin is the one who broke the toy. We can replace who with the subjective case personal pronoun he without changing its meaning. He broke the toy. In this sentence, the girl whom Justin stole from is upset. In this sentence, we check the correct usage of whom by determining if the relative clause, whom Justin stole from, is describing someone or something that is receiving the action. Let's move on to pronouns and sentences. When used in sentences, pronouns refer to nouns or other nouns. We've talked about this a little already. This reference should be clear. Otherwise, your readers might get confused about who's doing what in a sentence. Look at this sentence. They have been graded and they can review them online. Who can read what online? Right? It's a little confusing. Here are some ways to edit this sentence for clearer pronoun reference. The papers have been graded and students can review them online. Or your papers have been graded and you can review them online. Or lastly, the papers have been graded and they can be reviewed online. In this lesson, we discussed nouns and pronouns and their common and appropriate usage. Thanks for listening.